Every family story starts with childhood. For some, that meant growing up in a tight-knit, two-parent household with shared meals and traditions. For others, it might have been a single parent, grandparents stepping in, or even blended families. Those early experiences often define what we believe family values should be and how we carry them into adulthood. Welcome to My Generation. Today, we are talking about family values, and I'm joined by an incredible panel with a lot of diverse childhoods. We've got Khalil, we've got Paige, and Mustafa. Guys, my first question, welcome to the show, but my first question to you is, how did you grow up? And Khalil, let's start with you and we'll make our way down.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a very tight-knit family with two central values, I'd say. Number one was religion. So faith in God, faith in Jesus, and the byproducts of that, such as respecting your neighbor. Those were really instilled in me as a young man. And number two was resilience, determination, that I'm not going to have things handed to me. And so I have to go out there and work for everything. So those were the two central values I'd say my parents instilled with me.
Parents-wise, you lived with two parents?
Yes, and one younger sibling.
One younger sibling.
Yes.
And were you tight with your grandparents?
No, just my family. We were very close. We were actually not close with our aunts, uncles. I've only known my parents. And so that's really impacted me. I have a very deep affection for them, but I also know it's us. You know, not anyone else didn't have a big community. So it's just our core group.
Paige, I want to hear it.
So I grew up with my parents separated when I was about 5 or 6. I don't have a lot of memories of that. I feel like there's a lot of things that get blocked as a child to protect yourself. I had a younger brother. He's 2 years younger than me. So we lived with my mom. She was a single mom. She did the best that she could with the tools that she had. We would go see our dad every other weekends and Tuesdays, like a lot of kids that come from that type of family. I was close with my dad. He ended up remarrying. So we had step siblings for 18 years, like our teenage years. And my mom ended up having, so I have a half sister and there's a 20-year difference between us. And her and I are like best friends now.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet your mom. She sounds like a
awesome.
tough woman. Yeah.
She is.
Mustafa, you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. Big fan of what you do. My name is Mustafa Zuberi, and I was born and raised in Pakistan. And I was born with, obviously, two parents. I'm the eldest of three. And long story short, living a good, happy life with my parents. One day I get to see my parents are splitting up. And that brought my mom to move to Canada, who I moved with along with my two brothers.
Wow.
And, I'm thankful that even despite the divorce, I was close to both of my parents. And somewhat what Khalil mentioned was that I grew up with a good family structure, with religion, with traditions and whatnot. But when I moved to Canada and I had to work for things for myself, nothing was handed to me. I learned that in a country like Canada, there are many different family structures. There's I was raised with a single mother. There are kids raised with no parents. There's kids who are raised with a good financial background with parents both helping.
In Pakistan, what was it like? I'm just actually curious. What was it like? What was just give me a quick summary of that.
I mean, there's many different families. I came from a middle-class family with, there's families, I would say the poorer families have more kids.
Okay, yeah.
Versus than the richer ones who have maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 max, right?
It's a trend for sure.
Exactly. But
is divorce big in Pakistan or no?
No, but it is there.
Okay.
And, given social media and everything else, it is growing, and how, people are slowly opening up their minds and their sort of vision towards the 21st century. I think it is a topic that is growing. Back when I was young, I didn't know many kids who were divorced, and it was a very sad topic. I'm sorry your parents got divorced.
Paige, single mom, you grew up with a single mom, but you still saw your father.
Yeah.
It sounds like, Mustafa, you had a little bit of a different story. But Paige, I'm curious, on your end of things, what were some of the values that you were inherently grown up with?
So I think for me in my situation, being an adult and looking back, I realized that I probably learned more from both parents of what not to be as a parent now. So my parents were both very loving. I had a pretty great childhood. I don't have severe trauma that I carried with me. But as far as them parenting, we weren't religious. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. But we didn't have a church community that we were a part of. We had cousins and aunts and uncles that we
Did
would
you have a political?
Not really. No, but no.
You know how
that
families
wasn't a
are
part of it.
you're either this or that.
No, not at all.
Okay, we're going to jump back to this. I'm really interested in all of your childhoods. Khalil, we'll get back to you, but stay tuned for more. to see more of what family values means to us.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
Continuing our conversation on family values, let's bring in some historical context. In the 1800s, families were economic units on farms. In the 1960s, 78% of children lived in nuclear families, 2 parents, 2 kids typically. Today, isolation is increasing, and Canada's fertility rates, this is something interesting, are plummeting. In 1960, births per woman in Canada were 3.81, contrasting to today, 1.26. So clearly, guys, there's a huge change in the way that we're having families.
Yes.
I mean, we're not really having 2 kids per family anymore.
Not anymore, no.
I know single-parent households are growing as well. So these things change. But before we get into that, and whether it's positive or negative, I want to understand a little bit more about how you believe, subjectively or objectively, what are good family values. So, Khalil, I want to ask you, what do you feel, in your view, are objectively good family values?
That's a good question. Firstly, is there anything as objectively good, right? I think it's based on your region, your culture. And in that sense, I think good family values are those that help you best to integrate into society and give you the best chance of success. And that may mean something different here in Canada than it does in Pakistan, for example. So thinking here, let's say free speech, thinking how best to think versus what to think, care for our neighbors, values that are enshrined in our country as Canada, in our constitution. I'd say family values that align with that are what I'd consider objectively good.
Mustafa, do you think that there are objectively good family values that
I
are across the
personally,
board?
I personally wouldn't disagree with Khalil at all. We in Canada, we have universal family values. People who come from all backgrounds of life. There isn't one silver bullet that will solve all society's problems. But yes, being a good citizen and having your parents teach you how to be a good citizen and give back to your community, love one another. You know, in Canada, we have people from all backgrounds. Not all of them might agree with one another, but depending on your upbringing, I feel like how you give back to society is a really good way of how your upbringing was.
Paige, you have a unique story. You're the only one on here with kids,
Yeah.
kid. So I'm curious to hear from you on your
Yeah.
front of things, even just looking back at your childhood, but plus raising now a family.
Mhm.
What do you believe to be some objectively good family values that you're trying to instill?
I think empathy above anything else.
Mm.
If you can be an empathetic person and understand that we don't have a lot in common, you and I,
Yeah.
but I completely understand the values that your family has instilled for you, and you have grown up to be a very respectful young man. So I understand how
appreciate it.
those
Thank
for
you.
you in the short time of
It's
us
really a
meeting,
compliment.
right? So I understand, even though those aren't values necessarily that I would implement into my family and instill with my son, he still is growing up to be a very smart and respectful young man, even though the values are completely different. So I think empathy and understanding that just because you do it a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way and everyone else is wrong. Having that understanding with our neighbors and how
Is there a certain way?
no, there's not.
Because here's my thoughts. I would say, empathy, right? On top of that, love, which you could probably put in the
Yes.
same
I was gonna
bucket.
put that.
Love your neighbor,
Respect.
love your enemy. I mean, those are types of things. Yes, you can pull that as a Christian yourself, Khalil. But in the same boat, I mean, those are just some inherently good things that we know would allow somebody to integrate into society well. I guess, how do we define a good family value? Is it allowing a child to integrate into society well, or are there other things that we have to take into account? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess teaching your children how to respect other people's opinions. Like I said, we are living in a society where everyone has different opinions. You're never going to 100% agree or disagree with anyone. And how you approach that, tells you a lot about your upbringing. And especially how you talk to people with different opinions. Like, we all have different opinions. It really depends on how your upbringing was.
So,
Can I add on?
yeah,
to that
go
as well?
ahead.
I think it's important to say the medium isn't what matters as much as it's the core value. So I may get my morality of respecting my neighbors from being a Christian. Someone else can get it from being Hindu. Someone else can get it from being atheist. The medium changes, but it's the core values that unite all of us, regardless of our upbringing and backgrounds. That's what's most important.
That was very well said. Do you guys think, we only have about 30 seconds here, but are there some negatives to, over time, the changing in family values? Because we can't deny that values in families have changed over time. Only about 20 seconds here. So what do you think? Paige, do you think there's things have gone
I
downhill?
think with traditions, I think it's okay to leave some traditions behind
Yes. Yeah.
because we're basically following rules that dead people have left behind for us, and they might not work now for like our evolving society.
Society's
Okay.
So
ever changing,
yeah.
and you need to sort of go along with the times.
Mhm.
I think that's a really
let's
good way
get
to
back into it. That was well said. Stay tuned for more.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
Fast forward to today, where the definition of family looks very different. Families can mean, well, almost anything now. Critics argue, though, that modern values emphasize independence over unity, weakening the family bond or the nuclear family. You see, the question is, are these new models progress, or are they a sign we've lost our foundation? Paige, I had to cut you off because we were a little bit tight on time in the previous segment. You had mentioned that there are some traditions that are okay to leave behind. What would those be in your head?
So I can't speak to everyone because I'm not a religious person. I know that a lot of my friends who did grow up in a very religious household and had very strict values with what their parents were instilling, what they should do when they grow up. And they almost feel now as an adult like their parents were almost trying to control the narrative and control their own journey. Whereas I believe my son can choose whatever path he wants, and I will unconditionally support him as long as he's doing so in good faith for himself and to grow and evolve as like a decent and respectful human being.
Uh, Absolutely. I feel like given how we have progressed as a society, interracial marriages, marrying who you love was a big no from many cultures and not just in the West. And I feel like as we're moving forward as a society, we should be open to allowing people who they want to marry. And you should appreciate your child for what they want to pursue as well. You know, in many cultural backgrounds, if a child is trying to pursue a certain career or a certain a pathway, the parents will immediately shun that down. So I think these are some of the things that we should forget as society, especially as a first world country like Canada. These are main values that I think
You also have, I will say, just from how we grew up, completely different. You have a different cultural experience than what we do, or at least what I do. Growing up in North America, in Canada, it's a lot different than I can imagine growing up in Pakistan. One of the things I'm curious to ask, so we brought up religion, and not to make this a whole religious discussion, but it was a question that came into my head is, it seems as if some of the values that we inherently all agree on are originally religious values. Do we agree or disagree?
I disagree with that. I don't think they're all religious values. I'd say they come from different places, different backgrounds. I don't think it's just religion that gives us the beliefs we have. Like right now, we're having an evolution. We don't only want to speak about religion, but for example, we had a lot of community in the past. Now we're seeing a rise in depression, isolation, and so that could be seen as a byproduct of individualism.
But where does individualism stem from, though?
The economic changes. Since, let's say, the Industrial Revolution, for example, we moved from these tight-knit communities into urban areas. We're focused on just wealth accumulation, not finding the deeper meaning in life, for example. Let's say they were doing that back in the past. So there are definitely economic and cultural changes, and those impact our family values that we have right now.
So are there, and I'm curious, are there any or are there any values that are weakening society, like values that we've lost, in your guys' view?
I don't think it's necessarily a question of it being weaker versus stronger. I just think that it's no longer needed. So back in the day, in those times, maybe it was a foundation and those values were very important for us as a humanity to make that progress. But now I don't think it's necessarily needed. So therefore, we're kind of leaving those things behind.
I think it's a mix of both. And you folks are absolutely right. I don't think the Bible preaches on race. There's, God's not black or white or brown. So the fact that we've had differences of culture versus religion. Religion would preach one thing, and then culture would preach a more extreme version of it. Like, I know Christianity and Islam have a lot of parallels to it, and that's what you wanted to talk about. In Islam, you're not forced to marry one race. You're open to marrying many different races. But within cultures, we made those little pockets of who you can marry and who you
You're
can't.
saying culturally, we've really allowed our culture to influence.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Yeah,
We don't have.
Does culture stem from religion, though? The cultures we build stem from religion?
it can.
Yes.
Yes.
And no.
Like
I think it
historically, I think they do. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't think about it that way. Okay, so let me ask this question. Let's bring it back a little bit because we have about a minute here. Schools, media, government, do they have any sort of role to play in the values, in supporting the values that we in, let's say, North America culturally should instill in our families? Should they have a role to play? We only have about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. I personally think no, but only if there is abuse involved within the family, then I think the government or the schools have
Okay.
every right to come in.
Khalil, your thought really quick.
Yeah.
No, the focus should be on the family. There is a clear role for the state to play, but we shouldn't be focusing on schools to raise our children or the government to raise our children. It
'Cause
should
this
be
is
us
a-
as people.
This is a hot conversation
Yeah.
right now, but we'll get into it a little bit more. Stay tuned for the final segment.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
So looking ahead, the pressures on families are only growing. Rising costs of living, declining fertility rates, and more people living alone than ever before. Yet new forms of community are emerging from multi-generational households to digital support networks. The future of family values may not look like the past, but it does raise a challenge. What values should we protect, and what new ones should we create for the next generation? All right, so this kind of falls in a little bit. We have another conversation about free speech later, but the values that we should uphold, what do we think they are?
Community, I think, is very much, even though you want to raise your children to be their own individual and to freedom of speech is very important, but also understand that your actions and your words can have consequences, and therefore you are a part of a community. Even though it might just be me and my son and my partner in a little family unit, he can impact a lot of people around him, and so that's really important to instill.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'll echo that connection. Whether you're getting that from a nuclear family or you're getting it from a wider community, whether that's church, mosque, a political organization, always have connections with other individuals. That's something that will be transferable and make you successful out there in the wider world as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much disagreement with much
Okay,
of
let me
us,
ask
so-
you this. Was
yeah.
there anything wrong with the nuclear family?
I mean, like you mentioned, as time progresses, family dynamics change overall. Like you mentioned, in the 1800s and early 1900s, we have families living closely, giving each other that structure and that support. Then it slowly moved out with urbanization, and families started moving out, buying their own homes. Now we're moving on to smaller families, but there's nothing wrong. Families come with all shapes and sizes across the world. There's nothing wrong with what sort of family dynamic you have. It's mainly about spreading that love for the community and really sharing that living in a multicultural society, you should be loving and respecting everyone, and that's 100%. That's
Well,
what
I think
I
when
echo
you just say and I think when you just say there is a natural order that we all have to say that we are all human.
Yes.
That doesn't change, right? And so if you raise your kid that I'm a human, you're a human, you're a human, you're a human, then we should be okay.
We should.
Right? Now, there can be conversations otherwise around certain things, but one of my questions is, when we talk about a nuclear family, do you guys think it was better or worse? And as we continue with society, like when we talk about things becoming more unaffordable, to me, I think in my head, and we were talking about this, families should start living together again, because God knows how much we can afford as a solo individualistic person living in a city.
I would like to add on to that, and that's absolutely what it is. Economic pressures are one of the main drivers of changing family dynamics. Like I said, people are thinking twice about having a kid now. And I know a lot of people who are getting married and are staying with their parents. It's not easy to afford a home, and that's the reality we live in.
Hey,
That's not the
totally.
reality that our parents or grandparents lived in. So
I think that we were raised in a way, especially if you came from a family who stayed together, you were raised like maybe as a man that to be the provider and to keep that family unit together.
Right.
As a woman, a single mom, I was a single mom for a long time. I think if it serves a purpose and it works for you, that's amazing. I don't think it's necessary. I think that now that women are allowed to go and get their own mortgages and apply for their own credit cards, it's not something that we need.
Paige, can I ask you a personal
Yeah,
question if
for
you're
sure.
okay with it? Would not have been being a single, I'm sure you don't regret anything. I'll agree with
Yeah.
I think we see eye to eye on that. But if you had additional help in the household, if you had like a, call it nuclear family, right? If that was there, do you think things would have been easier or better?
In my personal situation with the individual who would have been in that family,
Fair.
definitely not.
Okay, pull
But
that out of it
yeah,
though.
but I also I had a community. I had my grandma. She was such a huge help. My mom is still a huge help. I have a really close-knit group of friends that I've known since elementary school. We come together. I have my community, and that's so important. So no, I don't need a partner. I'm grateful that I have one now, and he's absolutely amazing with my son, and I'm very grateful for that, but I don't think it's necessary.
Well said. Khalil, we've got about 20
I was
seconds
gonna
here.
play devil's advocate. I could say that I'd say the nuclear family is, I guess, the ideal because there's some things that you could learn from a man that'll be beneficial, and some things you can learn from a woman that are also beneficial. You need yin and yang working together for a good life. I'd argue that, but at the same time, those values could come from other places, from an outside community as well. So it's not a monopoly on just a father or a mother. You could get them from other places and other institutions as well.
Beautiful. Well, that's it. Thank you, guys. All right, we want to hear from you, especially if you disagreed or feel we missed something important. Join the conversation at My Generation on all social media platforms. And with that, we'll end off with this. Do not simply accept what you are told. Challenge your thinking, engage in differences, and listen to new perspectives. Have a great night.
I'ma rule the world, yeah. 해가 지고 뜰 때까지 I'm up, yeah.